Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artist Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more.
Hi, and welcome to our podcast. I was trying to think of what number it is, but it really doesn't matter. I'm your host, Ron Fortier, and we have Mike Pietragalla with us today, who was our first ever guest. And as I promised him, and I tell everybody when they do their first podcast here, this is not a one and done. More than likely, you'll come back. So Michael has the distinction of being the first guy to do it the first time, and he's now the first guy to do it the second time. So with that in mind, and just for the heck of it, the Pietragalla, because I've got a question about Gilda Stone Rooster.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me back, Ron.
You're welcome.
Fire away. Question about the name.
Okay. Gilda I was trying to look it up before you walked in.
Yeah.
Does Gilda spell her last name different? Because
No.
It's Stone Rooster. She refers to it as Stone Rooster. Is that a different dialect or?
No. I mean, she can name her place whatever she wants to name it.
Yeah.
But if you look it up in the dictionary, I mean, Italian,
Right.
English dictionary, Pietra is stone.
Yeah.
And galla means to rise above, effervescence.
Okay.
It's in a sense float.
Yeah.
So that's where I got the name of my business, Floating Stone, or Stone That Floats.
Yeah.
Again, galla, G-A-L-L-A, is the word.
Right.
It means
No.
to float. It doesn't mean rooster, bird, cock, male bird, anything like that.
Unless it's gallo, G-A-L-L-O. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Gallina is chicken,
Right.
both in Portuguese
Right.
and Italian.
Right.
So I just think it was kind of, I mean, she's had this business for years.
You saw the article, right, on her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wasn't about to go in and correct it because it's,
Right.
like
And I
said,
couldn't remember if it was an A or an O because I know there's the Chianti region, one of the best, it's like a cooperative.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Gallo Nero, the black cock.
Okay.
Which is, if you see that on a bottle of Chianti and you can afford it, buy it because it's like one of the best Chiantis. It's not like your mom and dad's wine in a basket in the checkered tablecloth little Italian restaurant kind of wine.
Yeah. Oh, like what my grandfather used to make in his basement. Right. No, like I said, she's had this business for, I don't know, maybe since 1969, 70, maybe around that time anyway. So whatever they felt the translation was at that time, I mean, it's, besides, Stone Rooster works better for a bar than it does for a woodworking business. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's the story. Yeah. That's the story. It's a family name.
Let's talk about you as an artist. And I have a question because kind of on a parallel track like with photographers. We had Peter Pereira, who's a photojournalist, but he's a photographer. And then there's then there's fine art photographers. And photographers really take, I mean, it's like when you say photographer, it could be a wedding photographer. Not that there's anything wrong with that because there are really fine, I'm not trying to be PC or anything like that, but you don't want to offend anyone either by crazy assumptions. So now when it's woodworking and furniture maker, and please tell us all about all these different terms and what do they mean and how do you associate yourself with them?
Well, there's a connotation to, I mean, like everything has a name, I guess. So woodworker, one assumes that a woodworker is a guy who just kind of dabbles on weekends and makes a table for the house or, whatever. A furniture maker is a term that I only heard when I worked for the aforementioned Gary, who said he coined the phrase, which I don't think is true, but regardless of that, a furniture maker appears to be a person who has more of a fine artist.
Okay.
It's like calling somebody a carpenter. Maybe in the old days, a carpenter, did everything. A carpenter made furniture. A carpenter built a house. A carpenter did everything. So I guess now everything has to have a name. So A carpenter does framing and hangs doors and makes closets and whatever, builds houses.
And there was also more the British terms, which you see a lot of those starting to come back, a fitter and joiner.
A joiner,
Yeah.
right, which is involved with furniture, a lot of fine joinery, you could go off into the Japanese joinery and really lose your mind. I mean, I don't know how these people cut some of these joints, but they obviously take a long time to do them. Yeah, there's joiners, there's shipwrights, there's, coopers that made barrels. I mean, everything connected with wood. So I guess maybe everybody has a little niche that they fit into.
Right. And if you stop and think about a barrel, I mean, that's pretty damn complicated.
Right.
You got a lot of curving. There's a lot of math involved in that. And even the
Exactly.
bands that go around that have to be angled for a proper fit.
Right. Right.
So you've been doing this a long time. How have you evolved? How did you, we heard this in your first podcast, but it doesn't hurt to go back. How did you start off and what was your journey and where are you now and where are you going?
Well, first of all, in a trade like this, I think you're learning all the time, And, there's an old saying that came about in the arts and crafts days that, the life's so short, the craft's so long to learn. And it's true. It's corny, but it's true. So I started out at Swain in fine arts as a painter. And like so many people, I think of Chuck Hawk off the top of my head, who's a sculptor, but he also does a lot of restoration of houses. I got into doing carpentry. My landlord trained me. It took me in. Basically, he says, well, you got to pay rent, so I may as well give you a job. And he taught me some things about carpentry. And it's something I kind of fell back into between doing fine art and trying to make a living. So, you needed to have a trade. It's always good to
Bread
have
and
a
butter.
trade. Exactly. So my bread and butter now is I can still do some carpentry, but as a matter of fact, I am for some friends. But I find that furniture restoration is also very interesting because there's new challenges that come. For instance, repair of veneer on antiques. Again, that is called marquetry. That's another skill. And what do? You read some books, you can look it up online, and you learn it, and you do it. So the woodworking has taken me down many paths.
The marquetry, the Italians, I don't know if it started with them or they got it from the Moroccans and North Africans and Middle Eastern, because that's like their thing. It's
I
almost
don't
like
know.
mosaics with wood.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting. I mean, some of the things you see today that people are exhibiting, they'll do fine marquetry on a tabletop, and it'll look like a letter and a quill, and it's all done with different colors of woods, and it's two-dimensional, but it looks three-dimensional when you look at it.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right now I'm doing more what I call treasure boxes right now, smaller things. And I'm thinking of doing a lid with some sort of simple marquetry, even something as simple as a compass rose, which you have to plan out. You have to sit down and do a drawing first. And a lot of these boxes, I don't do drawings. I just think of a size. I think of a shape, a square one, an oblong one, a tall one, a shallow one.
Didn't you say at one that they started off with scraps? So
Yeah.
you were challenged by working with what you had.
With what I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Which makes it kind of cooler. It's like the whalemen who were out there, bored out of their brains, long periods of nothing to doldrums, and they made things with what they had.
right, scraps of ivory or
Yeah.
whatever. On occasion, I do mill up some wood, but it seems kind of wasteful to use long, wide boards, which you would use as a tabletop and making a piece of furniture, and waste all that material just to make a small box. But I do use what I have, you know. And like I said, these things evolve. They're not planned out. I'm having a difficult time right now because I'm working on a design for a commission for someone.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants specific things as a gift for his wife. He wants 2 trays, he wants this, he wants that, this height, this width by this length. And I feel kind of constrained by this. Whereas when I'm making the boxes myself, it's like, okay, I'm going to put a grid in the bottom, and maybe I'll put a tray in it. Maybe I'll put in the tray, maybe I'll put ring holder. Maybe I won't. I'll put a secret compartment in it, or maybe I won't. I'll use this wood. Oh, and Purple Heart looks good with walnut, or, you know, Wenge looks good with a light wood, or whatever. And whatever it is at the end, that's what it is. It's like creating a painting.
Yeah.
You don't always know what you're going to get until you're done.
That's true.
And sometimes I like it that way, but then again, you know, a guy comes to me and says, I want to buy a jewelry box. I'm not going to say, no, go away.
Yeah.
You'll get what I give you. I'm not Picasso, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking as you were saying that, it's almost like being back in school where that was the assignment. You were given these restrictions. You can only use this kind of wood. It can only be this size. It has to have these components to it. And okay, now just have the freedom to do what you want. You're like, really?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's challenging, but yeah, it's exciting too.
Yeah.
You know?
Now, you do felting at all inside of these things?
I do put different fabric or leather or even like, you know, I've used different textured mat boards sometimes to put on the bottom that looks like a woven grass mat, things like that. It depends what kind of a theme I'm looking at.
Yeah,
you know? Some of them have lids that lift off. Some of them are hinged. Some of them have knobs on top. Some don't. You know, some have a sliding top, and you take things out, whatever is in.
Okay.
So yeah, they're all different, and they all create a challenge. One challenge was to create a piece that in Japan it's called a tomobaku, which means it's a box that it holds precious things. For instance, a tea bowl, which would be wrapped in a silk bag, which would go into a box. So I collaborated with a potter, and he gave me some tea bowls, and his partner gave me some wine goblets that she had created, and which we actually sold that piece at Dee Dee Shattuck's small work show this past December. But that was a challenge because then I had to find somebody to do the fabric. I had to find, you know, the right pieces and decide how this thing was going to be put together to hold this object. So again, I was confined to a size and a function, and it worked out actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great collaboration too. I mean, intended or otherwise. We've got a couple of questions. One of them about what is it about boxes? Now, I know ever since I was a kid, I was always fascinated by boxes. Even if it was something of the old salted codfish boxes, you would save them because you could put things in them. And the things that we put in there are kind of bizarre. I mean, little pieces of glass we found on the beach. Why do we do that? I understand that homeless children all over the world will have these treasures that they pick up. I mean, they'll just have the clothes on their backs and probably a blanket if they're lucky, but they'll have a little box, a little container, whether it's an Altoids tin or whatever, to put these things in. And to other people, why do we do that?
I don't know. That's why I make boxes.
Yeah.
I have the same attitude as these kids. I mean, I always felt, you know, as a kid, I had a wooden toy chest that my parents gave me. And I put in games and whatever crap I had as a kid. And it just seems that everybody has a box that they want to put precious things in.
Or things precious to them.
Yeah, precious to them.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
necessarily worth anything to anyone
Yeah.
else. It could, like you said, it could be rocks you picked up on the beach.
Yeah.
Or shells or whatever. A locket, a photograph of a lost, departed relative. Whatever it is. It's the whole thing about having a container to put things in that are precious to you, or just to keep things, to keep those things somewhere in an orderly place. I don't know. I always had a fascination for boxes, and the boxes that I make are, again, very decorative, adorned with different inlays and different colors of woods. The interiors match, or they don't match, or there's a geometric design, or whatever it is. So the box becomes a precious object in itself.
Yeah, there's a preciousness
Like the
there.
tea bowl goes into a bag, which goes into a box. And
Right.
it's put on a shelf and used at a tea ceremony, let's say. I don't know where this came from, why people do it.
Now, we're about the same age, having lived in tenements in this city. There's the armoire. Every three-decker house, as simple as it was, had an armoire, and you would have those precious things that you put in, like the good china, which would be taken out for the special celebration meals of birthdays, baptisms, Christmas, the holidays. There'd also be the pudding dishes that would go in the air, and those other things that weren't of the everyday, but they were precious because, as you said, sometimes they were like from somebody else. They were meme pepe, as known as, it's kind of interesting.
They were handed down
Yeah.
to your family.
Yeah.
Or they were precious, maybe they were wedding gifts or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, and they weren't for everyday use. So they were displayed, in this case, armoire, but on the other hand, they were used. They weren't just put up there and said, no, don't touch that.
Yeah.
You can never touch this.
Yeah, although I had an aunt that had a piano that was just to look at.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we both had relatives that had plastic on the furniture, right? Don't go in that room. It's for company.
Yeah, she did too. In fact, even if you did try to sit on it, you'd slide right off.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that. Why do people do these things? I don't know.
Well, let's get to tables, because tables, I remember Bert Wolfe, Gatherings and Celebrations, Rituals, Gatherings and Celebrations, I think that was the name of his book. And that absolutely floored me when I heard him say, the table is so much overlooked, but look at a table. Where are the positions of honor? There's two of them. And then from the highest, because there's a higher position and then a second position. And then, especially at Christmas or Easter or whatever, and then as everybody, the eldest children sit next to the father, because that was, the old patriarchal position of honor. And then it went all the way down. And then you had the kids' table, which was a card table.
Right.
Which, as an adolescent, you were petrified to sit at, because now your knees would hit the legs and it would disrupt everything that was on the table.
Shake the table and spill things.
But your admission to the big table was kind of sad. You had to wait for someone to die, to divorce, or to leave, move away. So tell me about some of the tables that you've built and some of the preciousness that's put into the table as much as the box, right?
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of tables. I mean, there's conference tables, there's dining tables, there's end tables, lamp tables, there's collector's tables.
Collector's tables?
Yeah, a table probably about the height of a coffee table. It will have a glass top, and we'll have things inside of that.
With the little drawers that slide out?
Little drawers, or you could just see it through the glass that's on the top.
Yeah.
And so what's in that? I don't know. Your stamp collection, coins, rocks, again from the beach or whatever. But it's a collector's table. That's sort of a big, big treasure box.
Are those coming back?
I don't think they've ever gone away, It's a very, very classical design with a beautiful cabriolet leg, let's say, and a drawer. Again, I can't answer a lot of questions about the history of furniture and the different styles because I don't know that much. I know what I like.
Yeah, and what you've experienced. That's pretty much what I'm asking. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Again, like I said, furniture making and this craft, you learn, you keep learning every day until you die. There are different styles, there are different species of woods to work with and so forth that are native to that particular style, let's say. Again, you know, dining tables. There are so many ideas about dining tables. You know, dining tables are a certain size and a certain width, and depending upon how many people you have in your family, how many people you want to seat. You know, there's sort of a casual seating, and then there's a formal seating. How much space you need between each person. That's how you design a table. And then sometimes some of these older tables have what they call a company board, which would be sort of a wing that's fits on the outside edge of the table. So you maybe it would slide from underneath. So you'd extend the table when you have more people over, a company board.
Would a gate leg fit in that category? Or is that a totally different kind of table?
You mean a leg that swings out?
Yeah.
Similar idea, but a company board is something that you would have maybe two runners that slide out from the end of the table, and you put this board in place.
I've actually had...
And it would sit there.
The neo-colonialism that was big during the 20s and then again in the 40s, maple was like a huge wood that they used. I never knew that's what it was called because it was tucked underneath.
Right.
And then you pull that out and it'd pop up like those old typewriter things that you'd have on desks.
Yeah.
It's called a company board. I'll be done.
There's several different methods of that same board, but that's what it's... So now the table is sort of convertible.
Yeah.
It fits in the room, and you know you can use it for everyday use, or the whole family's coming over, so we take out the company boards, like putting the leaves in the table.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. As you were speaking too about conference tables and this kind of tables and the importance of tables, don't forget that the peace talks in Vietnam were all centered around what kind of a table they were going to have.
Right. Right, and they eventually settled on a round table, which goes back to the legends of King Arthur, right?
Yeah. Tell us more about that. You could see everybody, basically, right? There was no angles, right?
It was like nobody's special.
Yeah.
Everybody's equal. We're seated at a round table. There's no head of a table. Now, that goes back to what you were talking about. The patriarch of the family sat at the head of the table.
Right.
If you were honored by your family, you're a guest in someone else's home, here, sit at the head of the table. You can carve the roast or whatever it is because you're our guest. Politically, everybody's equal. So, hence the round table.
Yeah. In your restoration work, you've probably run across some, I think anybody who's tried to restore an old piece, whether it was a hand-me-down or something you found in a thrift store or whatever, but the veneers, you mentioned veneers before that because that was the first thing that popped into my head. A lot of that, I think Grand Rapids, Michigan was the epicenter of the, I don't know what they call that, mass-produced furniture making. Everything was made by the local craftsman, and then in Grand Rapids, they just started mass producing furniture, and that's what most of the people of the 20s and 30s and 40s got their furniture. How has all that evolved, and how does that affect you as a furniture maker, woodworker?
Well, go back a little bit further. Furniture was mass produced at the turn of the century by Gustav Stickley, who came out with a simple design. This was sort of post-Victorian. He didn't like all this sort of frilly carving. It was very simple, which, again, I believe it was influenced by Asian design. A lot of it's very boxy. They call it mission style, arts and crafts, whatever it is. A lot of people jumped onto that bandwagon. So you found a lot of people in New York, the Midwest, as far south as Virginia and so forth. They were mass producing this sort of arts and crafts mission style furniture. So it was Gus Stickley, Stickley Brothers, J.G. Stickley. I can't think of some of the other names off the top of my head, but there were a lot of other people who joined onto the bandwagon. It sort of maybe twisted the designs a little bit, but it was mass produced. And as I looked at furniture, I've had a few pieces come in to my shop that were, stamped or branded with Stickley's name on it. And later on, you could see where they also started to cut corners. Back in the day, you'd have a leg, a wide, let's say, a 6x6 table leg that was cut in such a way so the grain pattern was pretty on all four sides. Okay, so they did what they called, they quartered the leg. In other words, they had a special cutting tool that would quarter that leg. It would fit together like a puzzle, so you had the pretty grain on all four sides. Later on, I've seen tables where they glue like 1-inch strips together to get that same thickness, and they'll put veneer on both sides. So they started to cheap out as time went on.
Yeah, and a lot of metal started, wood screws and brackets and such.
Instead of a through tenon, which the tenon or the joint would go through the leg and extend out on the other side.
Michelin style was pretty known for that, right?
Right. They wanted to show the method of joinery. In other words, that prevailed on the earlier pieces. Again, as time wore on, closer to the turn of the century, into 1910 and 1920, that was a dowel joint. And they'd glue a little piece on the other side to make it look like a through tenon. So I've seen a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, Stickley. Well, he had to save some money too.
Yeah. I had two Gustav Stickley cafe chairs that had his sticker on the bottom, and they were bent wood. So I guess they were steam bent. But over time, what happens is they start to really fracture or whatever. Yeah. And nobody wanted to touch that because nobody could fix that.
Well, a lot of that furniture, and like you said, from Michigan and so forth, the mass-produced furniture, well, it's similar to what we have today, except it's not quality at all. You look back on that furniture and you say, wow, that was a well-built chair or a table or whatever. Now the biggest competitor is places like IKEA, where you've got particle board with veneer on it, or melamine or whatever. I get pieces like that too. I'm working on a piece right now, which is a beautiful piece made by the Lane Company. It's kind of mid-century modern.
They used to make hope chests, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It has nice turned legs and it has a beautiful top with looks like dovetails cut in the design on the top, the two different veneers. And somebody decided they wanted to, maybe somebody dropped a cigarette on it or something like that, and they sanded against the grain. So that's been my project, to try to get tint that color to get those sand marks out, but they're never going to come out because they've gone right through the veneer into the substrate.
Or they've broken.
Cheap particle board.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
Let's. You mind talking about finishes? Because I
Not at all.
think that veneers is obviously a finish, but finishes, the old French
polish.
French polish.
Yeah.
And those other things. You tell us about that and your use of them. And
I really like to do hand rub finishing. On some of the more modern pieces, of course, I'm using urethanes and so forth. And there's all kinds of things on the market now. There's rub-on poly to give you this sort of hand rub finish look. The jewelry boxes, for instance, I use tung oil, 2 coats of tung oil, and wax, and it's buffed to a beautiful shine, which is also very easy to repair. Shellac is another beautiful finish. It really makes the grain pop. 6 coats of shellac, and I usually go over it with a varnish to protect it. I'm sure many people know from experience, rings on tabletops are left from something very hot or wet or whatever. Usually that was a shellac finish. So we put a coat of varnish over it to protect that. French polish, that's shellac and final tongue oil, and with very vigorous brushing with a pad that's sort of, you put a few drips of linseed oil on that, and you rub the shellac in, rub it right into the grain so the grain fills, and then you polish it. That's another beautiful finish. And there are different methods to that. I've kind of adapted my own, which is still the same idea with linseed oil on a rag and shellac, but some people make figure eights, some people go back and forth. That figure eight is what you've got to perfect, to have your hand get that motion in there.
Yeah, and that all comes down to time.
Oh, it's all time consuming, yeah.
And therefore, time equals cost.
Right.
Cost equals value of, purchase value.
Right.
Of the piece. It's sort of a crazy question maybe, but Formby's. Formby's Furniture Restorer. Did they in a way create in the 70s people re-looking at stuff in thrift stores and saying, hey, I can fix that? Because so many pieces of really nice furniture have been painted and they've done god-awful things to, and yeah, they were mass-produced pieces, but they're still far better than anything you can buy now.
Well, I mean, Formby's the brand?
Yeah.
I've heard good and bad about that product.
I mean, he was like the Orville Redenbacher of furniture polish. I mean, that's the only analogy.
There's Formby's, there's Minwax. Like I said, everybody comes out with these new finishes. Old Master is another finish. The old-fashioned finishes, I think, are tried and true. There is still a company in Maine, I believe, that does the oil and wax finish. That's all they do is oil and wax. They don't use polyurethane or anything like that. They use that specifically because it's repairable, easily repairable. You have a burn mark or a stain on something that is got a urethane or a varnish finish on it, and sometimes you have to strip the whole thing right down, which is, I mean, I work sometimes with a person who does furniture stripping, and he's always busy. He's always getting things in. He's always getting in antiques and beautifully hand-carved things that, post pre-war. I mean, like Civil War, things like that.
So let me ask you a question now. The separation of art and crafts, because, everybody, well, most people who remember their art history realize that the arts and crafts movement was a backlash to the Industrial Revolution. It took them a while to get that in gear, because that was around the 1840s in England. But when you're a furniture maker, a woodworker, we talked earlier about photographers. Now, a photographer can do weddings, they can do photojournalism, they can do, fine art photography, so on and so forth. Where are those lines? Do they get blurry in your I was just going to say, in your craft / trade / art?
Well, again, it's a person still has to eat and pay the bills and pay the rent. So if you're just a furniture maker, I mean, there are some people out there who are lucky enough to make a living just by making furniture, maybe because they've built up a clientele over the years or whatever it is. There are some people that I know who are influenced by the same people I'm influenced by, and they teach. So by teaching, what does that tell you? They still need some sort of supplemental income, or do they just want to share their knowledge with everybody? I mean, for me, I think it would be both.
That's another thing too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Legacies.
Yeah.
And I remember, and we were discussing that gentleman before. I mean, I came up with the slogan, creating tomorrow's heirlooms today. When you're making these pieces, there is that legacy, there is that continuity, there is that hand-me-downness,
right,
passed down, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think that prevails so much anymore. I think we've come out of that sort of young people hanging on to the chest that grandma brought over on the boat, from the old country, whatever it was. I find that, I don't know if it's just the millennials or what, but it seems like people nowadays are buying experiences. I may have said this the last time we spoke. It's difficult. Yeah, it's nice to have tomorrow's heirlooms today, or whatever you want to call it. Everybody has a slogan. Another person I knew had a slogan called "Shaker with a Twist." Whatever it is, made by hand. There are a few people out there who still want things made by hand, but I don't think it's the younger people today. Older people who want to collect something that was made by hand that's unique, like one of my treasure boxes, let's say, or a person wants me to build them a bar top out of live edge pine, which is another project I'm working on right now. That's sort of a hand-me-down. He's giving me the wood that his grandfather cut down from some tree that was on their property. So these huge 2-inch slabs of live edge pine. He wants a bar top for his backyard. So that's granddad's wood. That means something to him.
Yeah, we've come down to now with income that the discretionary is far overlapping the disposable, because you've got bills to pay, school loans to pay, auto bills, and it just goes on and on. So the disposable income it becomes very thin. So you have to put it towards these other things, even though in your heart of hearts you want to get something that you want to leave to your child or whatever. Which hope chests,
Right.
have they ever gone away? If they have, are they making a comeback, or they've gone for good? Because
That I don't know, but I think it goes back to what I said. There are a few people out there, fewer people, who want grandma's hope chest. I mean, I still happen to have one that was my grandmother's, that was my mother's, and now it's mine. It's a cedar chest in my front hall that I put, the winter gloves in.
yeah, and it has
In
that
the
scent,
summertime.
that scent of cedar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's I've refinished the top. It has a beautiful carved thing on the front, and it's obviously just around post-war. What's going to happen to it when I pass? It'll go to some thrift shop maybe, or get thrown out. Who knows?
Well, that's a sad thing, because when my stepmother and my stepfather, when I always refer to it as when the trolley started going off the tracks, with the both of them almost at the same time, because one exacerbated the other. They had those things in the armoire and so on and so forth. And I went to a couple of people that I know in this area that are antique dealers, and you could almost say the business friends. And they look at me and say, we can't take any more of this, even if it's Staffordshire, or even if it's Revere. I mean, plate. Forget about plated silver, where it's a dime a dozen. I mean, they sell it to people who actually pull the silver off of it and then trash the rest of it, because there's a flood on the market of so many of the World War II era passing on, that the value has just totally dropped.
Well, the furniture that I grew up with was suddenly popular. I don't do that much with selling antiques. I just see what comes in and out of my shop. But that sort of
the mid-century stuff.
Mid-century modern.
I love it how they call that. It's
1950s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I still have several pieces that when my father passed away, I took those pieces and now I have them in my house.
Yeah.
And they're great. They're solid wood. They're maple. They look fantastic. But again, antique dealers, as you say, they're full.
Yeah.
Nothing's moving.
Yeah.
I'm not in that market, so I don't know why. I can't say why. All I can say is what I said before. I think people are buying less heirlooms. They're buying experiences. They're buying IKEA furniture that, their sons or daughters leave behind in the dorm when they leave, because it didn't cost much and it's probably falling apart anyway.
Right, right. What's the best piece you've ever created?
The best piece I've ever created?
Or maybe you could top 5, on the top of your head.
I don't know. I have a lot of favorite pieces that I've done. My first ambitious piece that was my favorite, I still get compliments on it. No one's bought it yet, even though I've had a few nibblers on it.
Mm.
It's a sideboard that's sort of modeled after the green and green style, but it's very obvious. And it's made of mahogany and has 2 drawers in it. The other 2 pieces are, one is an end table that is obviously very Japanese inspired. It has an inlay in it of what we call a suba, or a Japanese sword guard, and it has little copper adornments in it. And I have another tea table that I've made that has that same inlay, and it's sort of like a trademark on different tables.
Okay.
And that small tea table has 2 chairs that go with it. I had a great time making these pieces, and I get a lot of compliments on them. But I don't think people want to pay for them. I mean, a piece like that, a one-of-a-kind piece, to me, $2,000 is not that expensive, especially for the amount of time and work that you put into that.
$2,000 seems like nothing compared to other markets. You could probably get 20 for that in like LA or something.
And I'm not talking about a conference table. I'm talking about a small coffee table size piece.
Yeah.
And the chairs that I made to go with it are chairs that basically, in Japan they sit on a cushion on the floor. These chairs, I don't remember the Japanese name for them, but they have little backs to them, more for the Westerners to experience that. So there's the tea table and the 2 chairs, and whatever the price is I have for the set. I always get compliments. Nobody pulls out their checkbook. But these 3 pieces are perhaps, to me, the best I've made so far.
We're getting to the end of this, and the next question is, we talked about legacy and handing down and so on and so forth. Would you live on in your work?
Well, I hope so. I hate to think like it'll all be forgotten, but I have pieces that are all over the country.
That was going to be another question.
Yeah, when I first started, before the economy took a turn, I've been shipping all over the country. California, Florida, Michigan, New England, Connecticut, elsewhere. But will they live on? I don't know. I'm certainly not Gustav Stickley.
Yeah. Say you.
Well,
have you ever found your work on an auction site?
No.
Dr. Richard Connor found one of my early pieces in Miami that was at an estate auction. And he's like, I know this is yours. I'm like, oh my God, it is. It's like
fantastic.
Wasn't like my best piece ever, but we sort of, it is like feathers. You open up a feather pillow, and let those feathers go.
Yeah.
And they're all over the place. And
well, to answer your question, I don't know. It would be cool, but I won't be around to find out, so it really doesn't matter.
Well, that's the whole purpose of this whole project. This is the South Coast Artist Index website project. That's the official name of it. Because this conversation will someday be heard by somebody who has your piece and goes, oh my God, that's him. He's talking. I can hear him.
Yeah.
Jessica Bergoli, her anniversary, her partner brought her flowers for their anniversary and took a photo of it, and in the background there's a painting. I wondered whatever happened to it. I was like, oh my God, there it is.
That's your painting.
Yeah, it was my painting. There is a thrill in that. And
it is a thrill. It's all ego, let's face it.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's id and ego,
Right.
Yeah.
I would think that, these 3 pieces, the ones that I feel that expresses my artistic ability at this point in my life, yeah, I mean, if sometimes someday in the future they become collector's items, I think that would be fantastic.
Or even one of your methods at some point in time gets picked up by somebody who's admired you and now uses that to pass on to their students, and they refer to it as the Pietragalla joint or something.
As
right?
the floating stone joint.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Can I give a plug before we go?
Sure, go for it. Go for it.
There's going to be an exhibit at the Marion Arts Center the month of April.
Okay.
That I'm curating. It's called The Vessels.
All right.
And it features myself with my boxes.
Okay.
The ceramicist that I've collaborated with, Hollis Engley, and a very fine painter, Craig Cogdall, who's also a Swaney. And how do they all collaborate together?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my boxes, Hollis's tea bowls, and Craig is a beautiful still life artist.
Okay.
Even though he does some great landscapes. So this all ties together.
Right.
So if anybody hears this before the show opens, I'm not sure the exact opening.
Yeah,
it's the month of April.
It may not, because of, how we're so far ahead, because we have a whole stack of stuff and we just let one out a week.
Right.
But it also may become, we've been talking about legacy. It may be now that you've mentioned this show, which somebody will pick up on.
Right.
Like Carl Simmons, wherever you are, you've got to get yourself in here, because this is the kind of thing that we're talking about. Promoting, fine, but now we're hoping that we're giving somebody a piece of information that gets that oh my God feeling going in there, and makes a real gives some excitement to people. So this In Focus podcast is brought to you in part by theartistindex.com. The Artist Index is a local resource for artists, art professionals, and art lovers. Until the next time, thank you from all of us at the Artist Index.
Thank you very much.
That was great.